So let me start off by saying that my experience with the Power Ranger games that graced the Game Boy Advance has thus far been underwhelming, to say the least. Ninja Storm wasn't the most exciting game ever conceived, but it had a couple good ideas at least. Wild Force was perhaps the more interesting game with its isometric viewpoint and split paths, and the less said about the anemic dumpster fire known as Power Rangers Time Force, the better. So I approached Power Rangers Dino Thunder with lowered expectations. Not just because of my experience with the past GBA titles, but also because of my experience with the rather lackluster GameCube title that I looked at a couple years ago. And going into this, what I got here was a game that, well, let's not jump that far ahead. Instead, let's start with the main points. Based on the 2004 incarnation of the long-running Power Rangers franchise, Power Rangers Dino Thunder allowed players to play as any of the three core Dino Thunder Rangers, Connor, Ethan, and Kira. Dr. Oliver is only playable during poopy pipeline minigames, and you'll actually fight the White Dino Thunder Ranger on a couple occasions, so it's a fairly loose interpretation of the season, give or take a plot point. That in itself isn't an issue. The issue is that unlike past Power Ranger games where you had the option to pick a ranger to tackle a level, each level of Dino Thunder sticks you with a Power Ranger by default and no means of swapping rangers. So the game always begins with Connor the Red Ranger in level 1 and oh, have fun with all the pop-up tutorials that interrupt the game each time you play a new game. And then Ethan shows up in level 2, and then so on and so forth. You'd assume the reason for this is that the ranger chosen is best suited for the mission, but each ranger ends up playing the same way with no real unique abilities that would be helpful or beneficial. More on this later. Dino Thunder boasts 13 levels of play, each of these divided into two segments, a Ranger segment and a Zord segment that will comprise either a one-on-one Zord battle or a pipeline-inspired minigame where you guide Dr. O to the special Zord so that it can be used as a selectable weapon. More on this later. However, the reality of the situation is that there are only 5 main levels in the game. 2 city blocks, a factory, a mountainside, and Megazord's lair, which is the final level of the game. And you'll be revisiting these locations to perform menial fetch quests, whether they'd be seeking out trapped humans or seeking out bombs to disarm. Even when the level is just fighting monsters to reach the boss, you still have to seek out all the monsters and defeat them before being allowed to leave the area. Each of the 3 Power Rangers has some varied attacks, but all pretty much play the same way. You have your standard punches that you could combo with a powerful ground attack, a powerful weapon strike, a semi-powerful jump kick, and a screen-clearing super attack that can be used when you have at least 10 Dino coins in stock. Though you can combo your way for a high score and attain a higher grade if you care for that sort of thing, the aforementioned powerful attacks can down the stock Tyrannodrones in a single hit, as well as quickly destroy containers that might possess pickups such as health and more Dino coins. Each ranger can jump, climb ladders, and drop down from certain platforms, but cannot wall jump, hang on ledges, or even crouch. Suffice it to say, it's the most rudimentary of basic side-scrolling commands at play here, and it doesn't exactly make for a particularly palatable platform game. But, in all fairness, control in this regard works. It's responsive, it's straightforward. I cannot say a single bad thing about the control here because it's pretty solid. No problem with controls here, that works fine. The problem with Dino Thunder is that a lot of the game feels like padding. You only have 5 levels of play here, and the levels themselves have some ground to cover, but aren't exactly massive pieces of real estate either. So in a failed attempt to try and give the game more meat, Dino Thunder denies the player the ability to choose their own ranger, and instead is structured in a way where you replay the same 4 levels with different rangers at different points, and that's how you get 12 to 13 levels of play pretty much. This city level, for example, where Connor, Red, plays fun with tutorials. Later on you get to play this level again with another ranger performing some other form of fetch quest. Kira, the Yellow Ranger, gets to save the forest twice on different occasions, but it's a slightly different background color the second time around. Each of the 3 rangers get to visit this power plant thing here, and it makes very little difference because it's still the same level with no differences whatsoever. You're still doing pretty much the same sort of fetch quest kind of thing, and as mentioned before, each ranger plays pretty much the same way. There's no variation in performance, there's no special ability unique to one or the other that would be beneficial at that point, which is somewhat disappointing because the Rangers in the Dino Thunder season had their own unique ability, like one did sonic screens and that sort of thing. And They don't have that here, but the point is, you're playing the same set of levels with different skins of Power Ranger that might look slightly different but don't particularly feel it, so it tends to feel like deja vu. On the bright side, however, Dino Thunder did nail Zord fights in that it's a straight up fighting game rather than some weird ill-fitting minigame or quick time event series of garbage. And to the surprise of nobody, it's actually the best part of the game. The D-pad moves your Megazord, the B button controls your left arm, the A button controls your right arm, and each arm has its own power meter. If an arm loses all its power, it stops working, and if both meters are equally drained, the battle is done. The best part about this Zord battle is that despite the 2 meters and the arm mechanics at play, it's actually pretty straightforward. You could dash forwards, backwards, block attacks, and if you manage a successful string of hits, you could pull off a super attack that does heavy damage. And while you only have one Megazord to play with, if you've tamed any Zords along the way, you could use them to equip the Megazord with new arms for varied attacks, some more effective than others. It's actually well thought out and it works. So why can't later games adapt this simple yet straightforward concept instead of coming up with shitty QuickTime games? Of course, taming Zords means you'll have to play the game's dreaded pipeline-inspired levels, which irks me somewhat because I'm not a fan of pipeline. I don't particularly care for the game. Anyone familiar with pipeline should know what to do. You guide your little Black Ranger head from starting position to the Zord in order to tame it and add it to your arsenal of Zord arms. Certain panels will contain bonuses or penalties, whether it be extra time, extra chances, or possibly do something to mess up your game. Completing the puzzle successfully nets you a new arm for your Zord, but if you fail, you just move on to the next level empty-handed. Fortunately, you do have a relatively simple password system that can be attained by just pausing the game. You also have 1 life, but can continue as many times as you want, so this is a very forgiving game, which is understandable considering the target audience. Fortunately, there's a skill select feature implemented for those who want a bit more of a challenge from Dino Thunder, if you want to go that route. The graphics in Dino Thunder are a mixed bag. On the one hand, the Rangers don't look all that bad, and the various level aesthetics are bright and colorful, if not a bit on the bland side. The animation isn't too bad in some regards, nothing looks awkward in motion save for some of the boss monsters. Unfortunately, when it does come to the various Pteranodrones and the boss monsters, these look a little worse for wear. Monster designs are often of poor quality in these Power Ranger titles on the GBA, and Dino Thunder unfortunately continues that tradition to a T, I'm afraid. The Zord battles are decent looking, as are the cutscenes and intermissions in between levels. On a whole, it's an okay looking game at best and not much more than that. I've seen worse. In terms of audio, it's about average quality. The sound effects are your stock collection of punching, kicking, and smacking sounds accompanied by the occasional weak explosions among other things. Nothing special, but they get the job done for better or worse. Musically speaking, and this is a recurring trend among the GBA Ranger games, tunes featured here are rather mediocre sounding, forgettable, almost like wallpaper music, which is something that's there for the sake of being there, not anything that stands out in the slightest. And I can't help but feel sad because Natsume used to churn out games with great soundtracks. Whether it be their cult NES classics like Shatterhand or Shadow of the Ninja, or even their Mighty Morphin Power Ranger efforts on the Super Nintendo. Compared to those older games, the music in Dino Thunder sounds weak and uninspired. Overall, Power Rangers Dino Thunder on the Game Boy Advance is fairly mediocre, possibly worse. On the surface, it does what it does competently enough, gameplay-wise and control-wise. The pipeline-esque minigames, as much as I don't care for them, does provide a bit of variety, and the Megazord battles are pretty much the only real highlight to the overall package. However, the inability to choose your Rangers, the limited number of levels, and the monotony of the gameplay's fetch quest focus, as well as just the overall sense of padding, aren't exactly high points in an otherwise shallow game that's more of a chore to play than anything truly worthwhile. All in all, this is one licensed GBA title that's best left extinct, and that's all I really have to say about that. So, yeah.